The airplane cabin was buzzing with the usual chaos: people shoving bags into overhead bins, kids whining for snacks, and passengers squeezing into tight rows. I had just buckled in beside my service dog Max, a gentle golden retriever who has saved me more times than I can count. For me, flying is never simple, but with Max by my side, I feel safe. That peace, however, shattered in an instant when a woman stormed down the aisle, glaring at us as if we had stolen something precious from her. "Move that mutt. That's my seat," she shouted, her voice shrill enough to make heads turn from rows away. The cabin froze. Some people gasped, others whispered, but no one dared to intervene. She pointed at Max as if he was a piece of dirty luggage. My heart raced. My service dog wasn't just allowed there, he was legally required to be with me. I tried to calmly explain, but she wouldn't listen. She stomped her foot and raised her voice even louder, demanding that the flight attendant get rid of the dog immediately. My hands trembled, not from fear but from anger. The audacity, the cruelty, the entitlement. It was unbearable. Passengers began filming, phones held high like shields against the storm. Then something I didn't expect happened. The cockpit door opened, and the pilot himself stepped into the aisle. My jaw dropped. It wasn't just any pilot, it was my old friend from college, Captain Ryan. He looked at me, then at the furious woman, and his expression hardened. "Ma'am, you don't get to disrespect a service dog or its handler on my plane," he said, voice like thunder. What happened next made the entire cabin cheer. The morning was bright and alive with motion as I stepped onto the jet bridge, Max trotting faithfully at my side. The sunlight streamed in through the long airport windows, reflecting off the silver body of the plane waiting outside. The air, it smelled faintly of coffee from the carts rolling past and the heavy scent of jet fuel that lingered like a reminder that soon we would be up in the sky. My heart thudded with the usual mix of nerves and anticipation. Flying was never easy for me, but with Max by my side, I felt anchored. His presence was more than comfort. It was survival. Max walked calmly, his service vest gleaming red against his golden fur. People stared, some smiling warmly, others watching curiously as we moved down the narrow aisle toward our row. He wasn't just any dog, he was trained to sense my triggers, to keep me safe, to ground me when the world threatened to spin out of control. Every step I took down the aisle reminded me of the battles I had fought to gain independence, and Max was a living, breathing part of that victory. We reached our seats. I tucked my carry-on into the overhead bin and slid into the window seat, while Max curled neatly at my feet, his head resting on his paws. The hum of conversations surrounded me, parents urging children to sit down, businessmen muttering into their phones, the occasional clatter of luggage wheels against the aisle floor. It was the usual pre-flight chaos, but from my little corner, it felt peaceful. I rubbed Max's ear gently, and he sighed, as though even he understood this was our moment to breathe before the long flight ahead. The cabin lights reflected off the polished tray tables and the wide oval windows, casting a daytime glow across the rows. The flight attendants moved with professional grace, greeting passengers with practiced smiles. I leaned back in my seat and closed my eyes for a moment, letting the murmur of voices blur into background noise. Everything felt calm, ordinary until it didn't. A sharp, piercing voice sliced through the steady hum of conversation. "That's my seat." My eyes snapped open. Standing in the aisle beside me was a woman I hadn't noticed before. She was tall with a sharp jawline, her lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. Her neatly pressed blouse and oversized sunglasses gave her the look of someone used to having things her way. Her finger jabbed toward the spot where Max was lying, and her glare was fixed not on me, but on him. "That mutt needs to move," she said loudly, as though declaring a universal truth. "I paid for this seat, and I am not sitting next to a dog." The surrounding passengers fell silent, heads turned. Some mouths dropped open in shock. Others lowered their eyes, pretending not to notice, but I could feel the weight of their attention pressing down on me. My stomach tightened, my throat suddenly dry. "Excuse me," I said carefully, keeping my voice even, "but this is my service dog. He's allowed to be here." Her eyes narrowed. "I don't care what kind of fake vest you strapped on that animal. I'm not sitting near it. He smells, he sheds. It's disgusting." I felt Max's body shift slightly against my legs, as though he sensed the spike of tension radiating through me. He raised his head, calm but alert, his soft brown eyes meeting mine like an anchor in a storm. I gripped his leash, steadying myself. "He's not disgusting," I replied, more firmly now. "He's trained, and this is his place. Legally, he has every right to sit here with me." The woman scoffed, throwing her arms into the air dramatically. "Legally? Don't lecture me about the law. I travel all the time, and never once have I had to sit next to someone dragging an animal onto the plane. I'll have him put in the cargo hold where he belongs." Her voice grew louder with each word, drawing even more attention. A child 2 rows back began crying, startled by the sharpness of her tone. The atmosphere inside the cabin shifted from casual chatter to thick, uncomfortable silence. I tried again, though my hands trembled slightly. "He's not luggage. He's a service dog. He has to stay with me." "Unbelievable," she snapped, stomping her foot. This is harassment. I demand the flight attendant fix this immediately, as if I'm Q. A young flight attendant hurried down the aisle, her professional smile faltering when she saw the scene. What seems to be the problem here? She asked, voice calm but wary. The problem, the woman declared loudly, gesturing toward Max with a dramatic sweep of her hand, is this dog. He's in my seat, and I will not tolerate it. Get rid of him. The flight attendant's eyes flicked down to Max, then up to me. She noticed his vest, the identification patches sewn onto it, the calmness with which he sat. Her expression softened slightly as she crouched closer. Ma'am, she said to the other woman, that is a service animal. He is permitted to fly in the cabin. But the woman was relentless. I don't care. I paid for comfort, not to share my row with a beast. Either he goes or I do. The flight attendant tried reasoning with her, keeping her tone even and professional, but the woman only grew louder. She accused me of faking a disability, of gaming the system to bring my pet on board for free. Every word stung like a slap, and though I knew her accusations were false, the humiliation burned deep. My face grew hot, my chest tight. I wanted to disappear, but Max nudged me gently with his nose, reminding me that I wasn't alone. Passengers began whispering. I caught snippets. That's a service dog, right? Why is she yelling? Unbelievable. A man across the aisle shook his head in disgust, while another woman pulled out her phone, recording the entire scene. I could feel the weight of being on display. My life, my dog. My dignity turned into public spectacle. The woman, fueled by the attention, raised her voice even higher. If this airline doesn't remove that animal, I swear I'll sue this. It is outrageous. I'm not sitting here another second. The flight attendant straightened, clearly torn between maintaining order and dealing with her outburst. Her calm mask wavered, showing the frustration beneath. She glanced toward the front of the plane, then leaned closer to the irate passenger. Please lower your voice. I'll see what I can do. But the woman wasn't calming down. Her voice carried through the entire cabin, sharp and unrelenting. She towered over me, pointing down at Max, treating him like he was nothing but an inconvenience. I sat frozen, fury and humiliation twisting inside me. I wanted to scream, to shout back, to tell her exactly what Max meant to me, but my voice caught in my throat. Instead, I reached down and stroked his soft fur, grounding myself in his steady warmth. His calmness contrasted so sharply with the chaos that surrounded us it almost felt surreal. And then, just when it seemed the scene might spiral completely out of control, something shifted at the front of the plane. The cockpit door clicked open, a tall figure in uniform stepped out, his pilot's cap in hand. The chatter died instantly as the passengers realized what was happening. The captain himself was walking down the aisle, his expression firm, his eyes scanning the row where the woman still raged. My breath caught as recognition hit me. The pilot wasn't just anyone, it was Captain Ryan, my old friend. The cabin fell into a hush as Captain Ryan stepped fully into the aisle. Sunlight streamed through the windows, catching on the polished brass of his wings and the crisp navy of his uniform. His presence filled the space immediately steady.com, yet commanding in a way only a pilot could be. The angry woman froze for a moment, as if even she hadn't expected the captain himself to get involved. Is there a problem here? Ryan asked, his voice carrying just enough authority to silence the whisper still lingering through the cabin. His eyes swept over the scene, me pressed against the window seat with Max curled tightly at my feet. The furious woman looming in the aisle, the flight attendant standing nervously between us. The woman wasted no time. Yes, there's a problem. This passenger brought a filthy dog onto the plane and took my seat. I refuse to sit next to an animal. It's unsanitary, it's disgusting, and it's against policy. Remove it immediately. Her voice cracked with self-righteousness and she crossed her arms like she had already won. A few passengers groaned audibly, tired of her tirade, but Ryan didn't flinch. He studied her for a long moment, then glanced down at Max.com as ever. Lifted his head to look at Ryan. His tail thumped once against the floor, as if recognizing a friend in the making. Ryan's expression softened briefly before his face hardened again. This is a trained service dog, he said, his tone clipped but steady. He has every right to be here. He is not going anywhere. The woman's jaw dropped. You can't be serious. You're the captain. You can order him off the plane. You should be on my side. I'm a paying customer. Ryan raised an eyebrow, his voice taking on a cool edge. So is this passenger, and unlike you, he's following the rules. I will not remove a service dog from a flight, ever. The words hung in the air, heavy with finality. Murmurs of approval spread through the rows. Someone clapped softly, and others nodded, relief flickering across their faces. But the woman's fury only deepened. Her cheeks flushed bright red, and she jabbed a finger toward me. He's faking it. There's nothing wrong with him. People like that just want attention, dragging animals around so they can sit for free. I won't tolerate it. The accusation hit me like a slap. My stomach twisted, and heat rushed to my face. I opened my mouth to respond, but my throat closed up. For a moment, I felt like the walls of the cabin were pressing in on me, the rows of eyes too much to bear. Max nudged me again, grounding me. I clutched his leash and breathed deeply, trying not to let her venomous words sink too deep. Ryan, however, didn't waver. He took a step closer to the woman, his expression hardening like steel. Enough, you don't get to question someone else's medical needs. You don't get to insult a service animal or its handler. This conversation is over. The woman's eyes widened, her voice pitching higher. Over, you're throwing me off, aren't you? You're really going to humiliate me like this? I have rights. You had rights the moment you stepped on board, Ryan replied firmly, and one of those rights was to conduct yourself respectfully toward other passengers. You've violated that. You've disrupted this cabin, and you've harassed someone under the protection of federal law. You will not be flying on this plane today. Gasps rippled through the passengers. A man behind me muttered finally, and someone else whispered, "Good riddance." The woman's face contorted with disbelief. "You can't do this. I'll call your airline. I'll sue you personally." Ryan stood his ground, his voice calm but unyielding. "You're free to call whoever you like, but you won't do it from this seat. Flight attendants, please escort this passenger off the aircraft." The two attendants, who had been lingering nearby, moved forward. One gently touched the woman's arm, while the other gestured toward the aisle. The woman resisted at first, pulling her arm back and stomping her foot like a child. "This is outrageous. Do you know who I am?" The attendants didn't flinch. "Ma'am, please come with us," one said firmly. "No. I'm not moving until that mutt is gone," she shrieked, her voice echoing through the cabin. Passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, the tension thick as a rope stretched to its breaking point. My heart pounded in my chest, and I felt Max lean into me again, as though shielding me from her words. Ryan leaned down, his voice low but so commanding it seemed to slice through her tantrum. "Ma'am, if you don't leave willingly, airport security will remove you, and I promise you, that will be a far greater humiliation than what's happening right now." The woman froze, her defiance flickering. For a long moment, she seemed ready to lash out again, but then her shoulders slumped slightly. With one final glare at me sharp and poisonous, she snatched up her bag from the seat. "This airline is finished," she hissed, storming toward the front of the plane. The attendants followed closely, ensuring she didn't cause further chaos. The cabin was silent until the sound of her heels clicking against the jet bridge faded into the distance. Then, as if on cue, the silence broke into applause. Hands clapped, voices murmured approval, and even a few cheers rose from the rows behind us. Relief washed over me in a sudden, overwhelming wave. I blinked back the sting of tears, both from humiliation and gratitude. Ryan looked at me then, his expression softening into something warmer. He gave me the faintest smile, one only an old friend could share. "You okay?" he asked quietly. I nodded, though my throat was still tight. "Thanks to you, and thanks to Max," he added, glancing down at the golden retriever who now wagged his tail proudly, as if he knew he had won. The applause slowly faded as people settled back into their seats. The flight attendants moved through the cabin, reassuring passengers and preparing for departure. Ryan gave me a nod before turning back toward the cockpit, his presence leaving a lingering sense of calm in the air. As I leaned back in my seat, the tension slowly drained from my body. The sunlight still streamed brightly through the window, casting a warm glow over Max's fur. He rested his head back on my knee, calm and steady as always. The storm had passed, and though the memory of her cruel words still stung, I felt stronger somehow, like I wasn't just surviving this flight, but proving something. And as the engines began to hum beneath us, the plane preparing to leave the ground, I knew one thing for certain. This journey would be remembered by everyone on board. The cabin was quiet again, though, a different kind of quiet, lighter, freer, almost as if the entire plane had released a collective breath once the woman was gone. For a few moments, there was only the soft murmur of passengers settling back into their seats and the rustle of pages as someone reopened a book they had abandoned during the drama. The tension that had once clung to the air like static had evaporated, leaving behind a fragile calm. I leaned back against my seat, my body trembling faintly with the release of adrenaline. My hands were still shaking, my palms damp as though I had run a marathon. Max shifted, pressing his warm body more firmly against my legs, his steady heartbeat grounding me in the present. His golden fur glowed in the sunlight pouring through the oval window, and his calm eyes reminded me that I was safe, that the chaos had passed. Passengers nearby began whispering words of encouragement. A woman across the aisle leaned toward me, her voice soft but full of warmth. "Good for you. Don't let anyone make you feel like you don't belong here." I nodded, swallowing against the lump in my throat. "Thank you," I managed to say, my voice quieter than I intended. A man a row behind us added, "That dog's better behaved than half the passengers I've flown with." His words drew a ripple of laughter, and the mood began to ease further. The small jokes, the kind smiles, it felt like a patchwork of strangers stitching me back together after being torn apart by the woman's cruelty. The flight attendants passed through, checking seatbelts and making sure everyone was settled now that the disruption was over. One of them paused by my row and bent down slightly. "I just want to say your dog is incredible, and you handled that better than most people could have." I smiled faintly, rubbing Max's ear. "He handled it better than me, honestly." The attendant chuckled softly before moving on. her presence leaving a trace of reassurance behind. Slowly, the cabin returned to its normal rhythm, the chatter, the shuffle of bags, the creak of seat adjustments. It almost felt like a new beginning, as though the flight was starting fresh after its rocky prelude. But my mind was still replaying the scene in sharp detail. The woman's words clung to me like thorns, faking it, mutt, disgusting. Each accusation felt branded into my skin, and no amount of calm smiles could fully erase them. For a moment, I stared out the window at the bright expanse of the tarmac, watching ground crew bustle about, their neon vests flashing in the sunlight. The world outside was moving on, steady and certain, but inside me, doubt lingered. Max sensed it. He lifted his head and rested his chin on my knee, his brown eyes gazing up at me with unshakable loyalty. I stroked his head slowly, letting the softness of his fur remind me of the truth I already knew: he wasn't a luxury or a pet. He was my lifeline, my partner, my proof of resilience. Anyone who couldn't see that didn't matter just then. Ryan returned down the aisle. He wasn't supposed. Two pilots usually stayed in the cockpit once pre-flight was underway, but he paused at my row, crouching slightly so his voice wouldn't carry far. His eyes softened as they met mine. "You hanging in there?" he asked quietly. I exhaled, a shaky laugh escaping. "Barely, but Max is doing better than me." Ryan's gaze shifted down to the dog, who wagged his tail lazily as if greeting an old friend. "He's a champ," Ryan said, then looked back at me. "And so are you." The words hit deeper than I expected. For a second I couldn't respond, my throat tight with the emotion I had been holding back. Ryan must have noticed, because his tone gentled even more. "Don't let her words stick. I've flown thousands of hours, and I've seen all kinds of passengers. The ones who scream the loudest usually know the least. Everyone else here saw the truth: you and Max belong here." I blinked quickly, trying to keep my eyes from stinging. "Thanks, Ryan, really." He gave a small nod, then straightened. "We'll be taking off in a few minutes. I'll make sure the ride's smooth." He gave Max a fond glance before heading back toward the cockpit, his presence leaving behind a trail of calm that clung to me even after he disappeared. Through the door, the engines roared to life soon after, the vibrations rumbling up through the floor and into my seat. The familiar sensation of anticipation washed over me as the attendants gave their safety demonstration, their voices clear and practiced. Around me, passengers leaned back, fastening seatbelts tighter, adjusting pillows, preparing for the hours ahead. Max stayed perfectly still, his body relaxed despite the rising hum of the aircraft. His training was impeccable. He had been through countless flights with me, always adapting, always calm. But even as I marveled at his composure, I couldn't help feeling a gnawing ache inside. No matter how many times people praised him, there would always be others like her, people who saw him as an inconvenience instead of a savior. As the plane began to taxi, I closed my eyes, letting the rhythmic thrum of the engines vibrate through me. I focused on Max's steady breathing, his warmth grounding me as the cabin tilted slightly during the turns. The sunlight shifted across my lap as the plane angled toward the runway, and soon the engines roared louder, a powerful crescendo that made my chest tighten. The force of acceleration pushed me back into my seat as the plane sped down the runway. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from the sheer intensity of the moment, the way the world seemed to blur outside the window, the ground falling away as the nose lifted. Max stayed pressed against my legs.com/steady, unshaken by the sudden climb. When we leveled off above the clouds, the light inside the cabin changed. It was softer now, a muted glow spilling through the windows, illuminating Max's golden fur like a halo. The woman was gone, the chaos behind us, and for the first time since boarding, I felt a fragile peace settle over me. I glanced around the cabin. A few passengers smiled when they caught my eye, their looks warm, reassuring, as if to say, "We're on your side." And maybe they were. Strangers though they were, their quiet support meant more than I could express. Leaning down, I whispered into Max's ear, my voice low so only he could hear. "We did it, buddy. We're okay." His tail wagged once against the floor and he rested his head back down, drifting into the easy calm of sleep. I let myself breathe deeply, soaking in the quiet, the light, the sense of belonging that had finally returned. The flight was only just beginning, but I knew this much already. No matter how high we climbed or how far we traveled, Max would always be my anchor, and with friends like Ryan in the cockpit, I wasn't flying alone. The plane leveled out smoothly, climbing above a blanket of white clouds that stretched endlessly in every direction. The sunlight shimmered across their tops, painting the horizon in soft gold. The cabin lights dimmed slightly, leaving the natural glow from the windows to brighten the rows. A hush settled over the passengers, the earlier drama now nothing more than a memory whispered in fragments. I let out a slow breath, my body still adjusting to the sudden calm. The hum of the engines was steady, like a lullaby vibrating through the floor. Beside me, Max shifted, curling tighter at my feet, his head resting gently against my shoe. His fur warmed my leg, his body as steady as the seat itself. He had endured every second of the storm with a grace I envied, unfazed by shouting, tension, or stares. Across the aisle, the woman who had spoken kind words earlier caught my eye again. She gave me a small, supportive smile. The kind strangers sometimes offer to remind you that not everyone in the world is cruel. I smiled back, though faintly, still a little drained. A flight attendant wheeled the drink cart down the aisle, the clink of ice and bottles marking her progress. When she reached my row, she leaned closer. "Coffee, tea, or water?" she asked warmly. Then, lowering her voice so only I could hear, she added, "You and your dog are doing wonderfully. Water, please," I said. My voice was steadier now. I accepted the plastic cup, condensation dampening my fingers, and whispered a quiet thank you. She nodded with a knowing smile before moving on. I sipped slowly, staring out the window. The clouds shifted beneath us like soft waves, endless and eternal, and for a while, it almost felt as if I could forget the confrontation earlier. But even as the silence wrapped around me, the woman's cruel words kept replaying in my head. "Faking it. Mutt. Disgusting." Each insult resurfaced, pressing at my chest. Max stirred, his tail tapping faintly against the floor. I reached down to stroke his head, whispering, "I'm fine, buddy." The truth was, I wasn't fine, not completely. But Max's calm eyes met mine, reminding me that I didn't have to be perfect. He was here for the cracks, the moments when my strength faltered. That was what made him more than just a dog. He was my tether to stability when the world threatened to pull me apart. The seatbelt sign dinged off with a soft chime, and passengers shifted into more comfortable positions. Some opened laptops, others ordered snacks, and a few pulled blankets over their laps, preparing to nap through the flight. For a while, the cabin felt like a floating living room, each person tucked into their own world. But then, as if the skies wanted to remind us who was really in charge, the plane jolted. It wasn't violent at first, just a small shudder that rattled the overhead bins. A murmur of unease rippled through the rows. Then another jolt followed, sharper this time, making a few people gasp. The seatbelt sign blinked back on. "Ding, ladies and gentlemen." Ryan's voice came over the intercom, calm and professional. "We're experiencing a pocket of turbulence. Please remain seated with your belts fastened. This should pass shortly." His voice carried reassurance, but tension still spread like a ripple in the cabin. A child whimpered in the back, and someone muttered a prayer under their breath. The plane dipped slightly, then steadied again. My stomach clenched with the sudden drop, my heart racing faster than the engines outside. Turbulence had always been hard for me. The feeling of losing control, of being trapped inside a metal tube shaking in the sky, was enough to send panic clawing at the edges of my chest. Max reacted instantly. He lifted his head and pressed it firmly into my lap, his warm weight grounding me. His deep brown eyes locked onto mine, steady and calm, reminding me that I wasn't falling, that I was safe. I stroked his fur with trembling hands, my breath shallow but steadying. The people around me may not have noticed the spiral in my chest, but Max did. He always did. The plane jolted again, harder this time, and someone yelped 2 rows ahead. My grip on the armrest tightened, but Max nudged my arm insistently, forcing my attention downward. His tail wagged faintly, as if to say, "Focus on me, not the storm." I inhaled deeply, then again, sinking my breaths with his steady rhythm. Slowly, the panic ebbed, replaced by a fragile calm. Minutes stretched on, each bump of turbulence rattling nerves across the cabin. But Max never moved from his post. He stayed pressed into me, steady as stone, his presence more powerful than any seatbelt. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the air smoothed, the plane leveled out, gliding easily once more. A sigh of relief echoed through the rows. Laughter broke from somewhere near the back, a nervous release of tension. The intercom clicked again, and Ryan's voice returned. "Thank you for your patience, folks. We're through the rough patch now. Smooth skies ahead." Applause erupted, not loud, but genuine. A few passengers clapped, others chuckled, grateful for the calm. I let out a long breath, feeling my shoulders finally drop. "You're a lucky man," the woman across the aisle said softly, nodding toward Max. I smiled faintly, brushing my hand over his golden head. "Luck doesn't even cover it. He's saved me more times than I can count." Her eyes softened. "He saved you just now, didn't he?" I nodded, throat tight. "Yeah, he did." The conversation ended there, but her words lingered. "Saved me." That was the truth of it. Max wasn't just an animal occupying space at my feet. He was the reason I could step onto planes, into crowded places, into a world that often felt too sharp. Without him, I wouldn't be here at all. Hours stretched ahead of us, but I no longer dreaded them. Instead, I leaned back into my seat, feeling lighter than I had in days. Outside the window, the world was endless blue sky and dazzling white cloud, serene and infinite. Inside, I felt a quiet gratitude settle over me. The turbulence had tested more than just the plane, it had tested me. And once again, Max had carried me through. As I stroked his head, watching him drift into sleep, I whispered, "You're my wings, buddy, always." And with the steady hum of the engines in my ears and the warmth of Max at my side, I finally let myself rest, knowing that no matter what storms came, I had everything I needed to face them. The hours passed more quickly than I expected, the hum of the engines and the soft rhythm of the flight wrapping the cabin in calm. After the turbulence, Most passengers had relaxed again. Some were dozing beneath thin airline blankets, others were watching movies, and a few were chatting quietly in low voices. The earlier chaos felt distant now, almost like a bad dream that had dissolved in daylight. I sat by the window, watching sunlight scatter across the clouds below, turning them into a shimmering ocean of white. Max lay curled against my feet, his breathing slow and steady, every rise and fall of his chest reminding me of the calm he brought. I reached down, running my fingers through his golden fur, marveling again at how much strength this gentle creature carried within him. The woman's words still hovered in my memory, sharp and cruel, but the sting had dulled. What lingered stronger was everything that came after: the kindness of strangers, the applause of passengers, and Ryan's unwavering defense. For once I wasn't just a passenger clinging to my service dog. I had been seen, heard, defended. A voice interrupted my thoughts. "Excuse me." I looked up to see the woman across the aisle, the one who had smiled at me earlier. She leaned closer now, her expression gentle. I just wanted to say what that other woman said. It wasn't true. Anyone who watched you with your dog could see he's more than special. Don't let people like her make you doubt that. Her words warmed me in a way I hadn't expected. "Thank you," I said, my throat tight. She smiled, her eyes soft. "He's not just helping you. He reminded everyone on this plane what loyalty looks like." Her words stayed with me for the rest of the flight. Loyalty. That was Max. Through and through. The hours rolled on, broken only by the quiet service of snacks and drinks, the steady drone of the engines, and the occasional announcement from Ryan in the cockpit. Each time I heard his voice, calm and professional, I felt a swell of pride. He had been my friend years ago, but today he had been more than that. He had been my protector, stepping in at the moment I needed someone most as the end of the flight neared. The captain's voice filled the cabin once again. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be beginning our descent shortly. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." The seatbelt sign chimed on, and passengers stirred awake, stretching, adjusting, tucking belongings away. The cabin filled with quiet activity, the shared anticipation of returning to solid ground. My chest tightened with the familiar nerves of landing, but Max pressed closer against me, sensing my unease. His presence steadied me once again, pulling me back from the edge. Out the window, the clouds thinned, revealing glimpses of the earth below, patchwork fields, winding roads, and the glint of rivers catching sunlight. The plane dipped gently, angling toward its destination. My heart pounded with every shift, but I focused on Max, on the steady warmth of his body, on the gentle weight of his head nudging my knee. The descent was smooth, and soon the skyline of the city spread out beneath us, sunlit buildings rising proudly against the horizon. The engines lowered in pitch, and the runway appeared in the distance, stretching long and straight. I closed my eyes, gripping the armrest as the wheels touched down with a firm bump. The cabin jolted, then steadied as the engines roared, slowing the plane down. Applause broke out spontaneously, as it often does after a safe landing, and I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. We taxied to the gate, the plane rolling to a stop as the familiar ding announced our arrival. Passengers unbuckled seatbelts, reached for bags, and filled the air with chatter. But before anyone could stand, the cockpit door opened once more. Ryan stepped into the aisle, his cap tucked under his arm. He scanned the cabin before his eyes found mine. A small smile crossed his face as he walked toward my row. Passengers moved aside respectfully, giving him space. When he reached me, he crouched slightly, his voice low but warm. "You made it." I let out a laugh, shaky but real. "Thanks to you." "And Max." Ryan reached down, giving Max a gentle scratch behind the ears. Max's tail thumped happily against the floor, and Ryan chuckled. "He's a hero. You both are." I shook my head. "I didn't feel like a hero back there." "You don't have to feel like one to be one," he said simply. "You stood your ground. You didn't let her break you. That matters more than you know." His words settled deep into me, heavier than the plane itself. For the first time in a long time, I felt something more than survival. I felt pride, not just in Max, but in myself too. Passengers began filing out, offering quiet words as they passed. "Take care, beautiful dog. Glad you were here." Each small kindness felt like a stitch in the wounds left by the earlier cruelty. Ryan straightened, nodding toward the exit. "Go on ahead. I'll see you off." I gathered my bag, gave Max's leash a gentle tug, and stood. He rose immediately, poised and steady, ready to lead me back into the world. Together, we walked down the aisle, the sunlight from the open door spilling into the cabin like a promise dot as I stepped onto the jet bridge. The cool rush of outside air hit my face. Relief washed over me, stronger than anything I'd felt all day. The ordeal was over, but the memory of it, the confrontation, the defense, the resilience would stay with me forever. At the end of the jet bridge, I turned back once, catching sight of Ryan in the doorway of the plane. Giving me a final nod, I raised my hand in silent thanks before turning forward again. Max trotted beside me, his tail swaying gently. His presence a reminder that no matter how high the flight or how rough the turbulence, I was never truly alone. He wasn't just my service dog. He was my strength, my anchor, my hero. and as we stepped into the bright daylight of the terminal, I knew this wasn't just the end of a flight, it was the beginning of something stronger inside me.